Hello, everyone. This is Marie Huggins with Mobility Collective, here and pleased to bring you this panel discussion where we'll discuss a little bit about the landscape of global mobility programs as our industry stabilizes in the aftermath of COVID. Our esteemed professionals include Elena Anderson from Academic Travel Abroad, which is a travel and tourism company. Dee Moore from Genesis Care USA Services, which is a hospitals and healthcare company. We have Desiree Nelson with Warner Brothers Discovery, a mass media company, and Kristen Faison with Zendesk, my apologies, an IT company. The global mobility programs they manage cover all regions across the globe and include short-term, long-term assignments and international relocations, as well as some other business travelers and remote workers. I am super excited to hear the insights that you all have to share with us today, particularly around remote working, which is highly sought after these days, and the employee experience as a whole. So thank you so much for joining us. And we're just gonna jump right in with, if you all could just share with me your thoughts on what a successful expatriate assignment or international transfer looks like at your organization.
I'm happy to jump in here. I think first and foremost, it's that we're able to say that the experience of the employee and their family was a positive one, one where they felt they were in fact supported from start to finish. They knew who to go to if they ever had a question or a concern. They felt that they had, a circle of support around them. I think we all know, being in this space for the amount of time that we have, that relocating in any capacity is extremely stressful. It can be extremely stressful. And I think from my perspective, from my team's perspective, our goal is to work to alleviate that stress as much as we possibly can. So I think that's one of the main things from my lens.
And I think that's a great concept as well. And just to add on to what Kristen said, for us, when the compliance and the contractual things are in order, when clear communication is given as far as what the assignment is, where it needs to be in a timely manner so that we can make preparations to really give the employee a great experience, that helps tremendously. And then the great thing about the expats here is that a lot of times they are on a rotation assignment. So if they choose to go back and they complete one, I feel like that's a successful expatriate experience. And we're able to make sure that they're taken care of throughout the assignment. So that's what I would consider a success.
That's good feedback. See?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with both Kristen and Desiree from, at Genesis Care, just looking at the support that was given to the employee, not only the employee, but also to the family, and making sure that we provided the support in advance and kind of set expectations on what it was that they were going to need, so that when we arrive, we kind of set them up for success versus trying to react in once they got here. And then making sure that, all of the objectives or the knowledge transfer that was the reason for the assignment, making sure that we, throughout the assignment, that we stayed focused on those aspects and making sure that they were met and they returned, like Kristen said, coming back, giving a positive experience, so that when we have others that want to come, they'll say, yes, go on assignment. It was a great experience for us. So that's one of the key things from us.
And Elena?
Yeah, and I would add on top of that, most of our assignees are localized, and really, if there is no satisfaction or issues with the assignment, we have disengagement, and it's something that would expose our brand adversely. So we look at, while we're working on being proactive and looking at satisfaction throughout the assignment, we want to make sure that the expectations and outcomes are met. So we see success as the completion of the mission per se, and being able to see ongoing engagement with all locations, whether it's the headquarters office or on site. And we do check-ins, and as much as possible, make sure that we do ask about how things are going, especially if there are other external factors in the landscape, like political or weather. You never know. So we just proactively check in, but success just means completion right now, and we want to add on top of that.
I think the being proactive part and not reactive is so critical to really getting an accurate read on someone's assignment or their relocation going well. And I think also what you ladies said about the feedback, whether they go on assignment again, whether they, relocate again, or whether their coworkers are able to give them encouragement in terms of facilitating them going on an assignment, someone else going on an assignment. I think those are all really good indicators. And so just to be complete, I now want to ask, conversely, how would you define a failed assignment or relocation?
I'll start, and I would definitely say we notice a failed assignment when we refer to it in the industry as a blackout or a brownout. There's a gradual disengagement, a departure. And that is something that would expose us, because as a travel company, the travelers are either left without support, or we work with study abroad students, they don't have a contact. And so it's a snowball effect with when something is unsuccessful, because we not only hear from the employee, we hear it from all the stakeholders, partners, and even the clients and travelers themselves. So it's usually an instant dumpster fire if it's not successful. And so it's very critical for us, not just for the logistics and operations, but again, it's part of the brand if we don't ensure success. But a failure is really tough to manage when it happens, so we try to avoid it.
I'm happy to jump in. I would just say, adding on top of what Elena just said, I think, majority of our movement are permanent one-way moves. And so I think it's telling how often, I would say that an employee is continuing to either reach out and or escalate things to us. I think that's an indication that something may have not been done correctly or adequately. And then I think, worst case scenario, which we have had, unfortunately, is, shortly after they arrive in the destination, they're exiting the company or exiting the organization. And so, I think in that lens, whether it's that they're exiting and going to another organization within that country or going back home, I think that within itself is extremely telling and showcases that something was done wrong, whether it was with respect to the support that they received. Maybe we didn't set the appropriate expectations, as Desiree and Dee mentioned, that importance of that right at the onset of what to expect, or maybe it's just that their family wasn't able to adequately adjust to this new location, not realizing all that it entails to live in a new city, state, country, you name it. And so I think that's certainly the greatest picture of failure from my lens, is if ever I see someone that's looking to depart the organization or return back home shortly after only arriving in that new host country.
Yeah, and I'll jump in as well. I think for us, the same thing goes back to when they start reaching out more and more with a lot more questions, inquiring with a lot more questions. The family, I've had spouses reach out to me and start asking questions about the schooling, about the area, about jobs for them, or that they decide that the family's going to go back home on holiday. They seem to be going back more often. And so when it gets to where the spouse and the family says, I can't do this, that becomes more of a failed experience because they don't want to separate the family, right? So it's like, again, as I had communicated earlier, how do we make sure that we have that information ahead of time so that we can able to support that family so that know that it will be a successful assignment, not only for the employee, but also for the family.
Absolutely. And I think for us at Warner Brothers Discovery, the news has to be done wherever it is happening. So I don't know that I can say I've experienced a complete failure, but I can say there have been lots of delays if we haven't put the right provisions in front of something, or there's a failed visa, or we're not sure, or the payroll is not set up properly for the employee based on the location that they're going in. So I think some of those hiccups can delay things, but typically we take the time and we're able to get them to where they need to be. So it normally works out. But again, we want to make sure that they feel supported on the front end so that we're not having to go through all of those delays.
Yes, ma'am. Many moons ago, I was an international consultant. And as you all spoke, I remember one person in particular who moved, it was an international relocation to South America, no, from South America to the United States. I apologize. The only failed relocation that I knew of, right? So we all know that in-house within your companies, you may have a little bit greater insight than someone working at a relocation management company outside of the surveys, right? But it was very sad to me. Well, one, because I took my job very seriously, but also because there was no indicator from the outside that things didn't go well. And that was because things went fine for him. It did not go well for his family. And it's a lot of money for a company to invest in someone relocating internationally or going on assignment. So to get him all the way there, get him all the way through the majority of his benefits, and then have to turn around and send him back home, that was probably my first real insight into how impactful a negative experience can be on, for someone who is either relocating internationally or going on assignment. So it's good to know that you all really have a good line of sight into some of the things that you can be looking into to make sure that you can ensure someone's assignment or relocation is successful. And if you see it going down the wrong path, try to steer it the right way, right? So in keeping with that, I want to expound a little bit and understand what your companies may do. Like, do you have any type of assessments that are completed to determine the success or failure? Specifically, I know a lot of companies rely on third-party surveys from your relocation management companies. I don't know which of your companies actually use a relocation company or if you survey them internally yourself, but I like to know if you utilize that type of feedback, and then also beyond that, what practical steps are taken once you receive whatever data you may use so that you can create better global mobility policies for the future.
Okay, that's a great question. And I think it's a very important one when you're trying to set a level of excellence for your employees. So for us, we don't have an overall survey from the company standpoint, but we do rely on our vendors who take great care of our employees to give us feedback from the services that they've received. But we also, as relocation and global mobility professionals, we speak to our employees to make sure and check with them regularly to make sure things are going okay. And ultimately, we have to make adjustments along the way. So if there's something not going right, we need to straighten it up or make different adjustments. If they need to stay longer, we try and reach out to the business to get the proper support and temporary housing or whatever the case might be. So that is the biggest thing. I think we should have something in place because it is really important, but I think we're working on that, especially since we've gone through so many mergers recently. So we're looking at our policies and looking into how we can better service our employees.
Now, Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm feeling like based on your response, you don't work with a relocation management company and that you all, handle it directly yourself. And so in that case, do you feel like there is heightened transparency because they're working directly with you and so they feel a greater investment in giving you the feedback? Just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so a portion of our company, so right now we almost have like 3 different functionalities. So one part does work with an RMC, but we, my colleague Andrew and I, we are fully internal. So we do have a close relationship. And I do feel like we see a lot of things going on. I feel like we have a little more control over how we respond to when things are out of sorts. So we try to catch it immediately and also meet whatever needs. And then a lot of times I think they feel more trusted, like we're a trusted partner to them, and they'll give us the feedback we need more readily. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to add to that for us, we're just like Desiree, we also do not have any internal surveys. We do rely on our RMC, immigration and tax providers to provide us feedback on the assignees as they're going through the process. Because a lot of times they hear a lot that we don't hear. That doesn't come to us directly. We are looking internally, actually, though, to put together a survey internally because we feel that the information that's coming from the providers, while it's good information, is still not getting down to the main core of the actual assignment itself, and how it relates back to them coming successful and no failure. And so we are looking at putting together a survey at Genesis Care. But based off the information that we do get from our providers, we have like restirred the ship. For instance, when it comes to temp living or definitely rental cars, it was one of our biggest issues, whereas the rental car was for a shorter period of time than the extended stay was, or the temp living was. And so we kind of redid our policy that the rental car aligns with the temp living. So that way, when they get to the permanent housing, they don't have that much to focus on. They've already got all that taken care of. So we do take into account what they say, and we try to do an on-the-spot correction if we can.
Okay, that's good. Elena?
Now I would say at academic travel abroad, this whole global mobility area is new. And so I've been with the company for 14 months now. And what has changed is that, one, we haven't used third-party providers at all, but it's all internal, but less structured. It's more conversation, interviews. Many of these positions are hired directly. So that's different. So it's an education of the company culture as well as the position and sometimes the host country location. Therefore, we need more than one team to just make sure that it's going to go well and to make sure that, efforts are set up properly. Where a goal that we would like to do is be more structured with the survey so that we can have some data to compare from year to year, from role to role. But one matter that I've introduced is having a standardization in support. So same type of offering and transition support, same type of local housing and local support. And it's taken a lot of benchmarking and research when you're working across countries. But the intent is to have an additional layer of support, not just from the program team that's working directly with them year round, but it's a different demonstration of intent and duty of care, really, when they hear from the central HR team about the global mobility support. So we're sending the message that we see you as a human being and really want to know about your family needs. And there's more transparency from us, but also authenticity from the leadership and being able to support it. But then there's more of an opening up and awareness of where they are. And if a potential hire turns us down, they know exactly why it may not be a good fit. So it's not an assessment in the traditional sense.
Mhm.
We're opening and having multiple conversations where they have opportunity to envision themselves in the assignment and vet out whether or not their family will work out, if it'll work out for their current career objectives, and understand what exactly is intended for the position. So we try to bring the human side into it first before we get back to the assessment in a more structured way.
It's so interesting hearing all of us in the different ways in which we tackle this. So at Zendesk, we actually do both. So we actually do offer internal surveys to all of our, I'll say transferees, but also just employees that we're supporting in a general sense. So our program is structured in a way where, I mentioned our transfers are mainly one-way permanent moves, but then we also have a very large portion of our population that we're supporting that are local hires, but they are visa holders. And so we do offer, we send out monthly surveys to anyone that has, either newly joined the organization or newly transferred into a new role, and they've received relocation support to understand, full picture what their experience was. And, I think similar to, what Desiree mentioned, we are keeping in constant communication with them. So, it's our team that employees or new hires are hearing from first and saying, hey, this is what you can expect. These are the third-party providers that we work with. They're going to reach out to you. If you have any questions or concerns, don't know who to go to, always feel free to come to me and I can help, guide and direct us accordingly. And, I think part of the reason why we have the internal surveys is a reflection of our company culture. So we are, I'll say employee first, if you will. Customer service is at our core, and we apply that to our employees as well. We want to make sure that our employees are happy, that they're healthy, that they're supported. And so surveying is what we do even just on a regular basis for our employee population. I think as far as what we leverage our third-party providers for is around more so on the policy side of things. So, if we've noticed an uptick in exceptions in one of our policies, maybe we need to, dive into that a little bit more and see if we need to make a modification to the policy. So it's no longer that we're receiving 20 exceptions for the same thing, but this is just standard now. And, I think even with our providers, we're also meeting with them regularly as well, walking through cases that are ongoing, understanding, if there are challenges that they're seeing or that employees are raising to them, so we can tackle them in the moment. But then again, doing that reflection, we have our biannual reviews where we're reflecting on, okay, what all have we accomplished? What are things that we need to work on, potentially look to prioritize as far as changes in the future and going forward to make it that ensuring that our offerings are what we want them to be and that our employees are happy with them.
And just out of curiosity, for those of you who actually are surveying your employees, and I trust me, I understand the value of just talking to them, but specifically when you're surveying your employees, are you doing that? Are you surveying them once? Are you surveying them in the beginning? Are you surveying them at the end once everything has been completed? And I ask that because just in thought, a lot of the times what's on your mind is what is most recent, what is transpiring right now. And that could be a two-edged sword, right? If you survey all the way at the end and everything has been done, it may have wrapped up good. It may have started off bumpy. And I'm just curious if that skews the results that you see, and if you even have visibility into whether or not it does. I'm just curious.
That's a really good point. I would say from my standpoint, so we survey on a monthly basis, and it's always going to be a month after they have either newly started with us or transferred. And so it's interesting because they'll get their survey from us, but then when I think of our RMC, that survey will come probably a month or two even after that, because it's going to be after they've received their household goods and whatnot. We've seen pretty close alignment with respect to the survey results that we're getting, because not everybody responds, but the survey response that we're getting from employees, and then looking at the feedback and what is shared with, whether it's our RMC or another provider as well. So we've seen pretty close alignment between the two.
Is anyone else sending formal surveys that you can share, or is the remainder is just conversation, pulse points? Okay. Now, speaking, as I open this up, I talked to our, post-COVID landscape of global mobility. And so I wanted to know if there are any initiatives that you've put into place post-COVID to address specifically employee experience for them when they are participating in any of your global mobility programs.
I'll jump in, and this is something I'm actually excited about. We just implemented a pulse check process, which is a mini version of an employee engagement. So it's designed to be global in nature, regardless of the host country you're based in. And while it's a new concept, we are addressing broader issues outside of the assignment. So it's issues such as psychological safety, work-life balance, and we're able to compare data across job assignments or different types of assignments, whether they're localized, domestic employees, and we have a lot more remote workers where we're curious about their experience, but it's rare that you treat your global assignees just like your domestic employees and really compare all of the experiences across the globe. So this is an effort to hear everyone's voice and to compare their voice regardless of their work location. So it's in the tune of us wanting to have an equitable experience. So it's very DEI driven. And since we also see that as part of our mission and having a better understanding across borders. So in looking at that, the whole design took a different mindset in looking at, okay, we're not just going to have a set of questions, but we need to, for the section with demographics, we need to be much more inclusive and make sure that this is understood across whether or not you're using like a machine readable, or if you need to translate the survey. It was a lot of work going into just 10 questions, right? And so it's short as a survey, but we do check in to see how things are going. And our intent is to do it on a quarterly basis and compare it across time.
And Desiree?
That's awesome, Elena. Unfortunately, we have been, well, I don't know if it's, the merger has been everything, the pretty much catalyst for everything that we've been doing. So I can't even say COVID per se.
Right.
So as we just have to get to a space where we can come up with a general policy for each of our divisions as we come together. So I don't know that we really have anything in place related to COVID, but we are trying to do something moving forward that's going to benefit the employees.
Well, do you have any new services or like maybe a different service delivery model that you all are contemplating, just going forward to improve employee experience?
So I think the focus is cost efficiency, trying to streamline some of our vendors. So of course, we all use different vendors. We are also trying to give the employees one space to even just access us with the various questions and concerns that they have. We're even going through our email changes right now, this very day, that I'm unable to access certain things. So, I mean, things are just constantly changing. So I think we're just trying to make it as accessible and easy as possible for the employees to get their needs met. We don't have anything in concrete right now, but the goal is to solidify a lot of that this year.
Okay.
That's a very good, Desiree. I think for us, we're in alignment with you. Genesis Care actually came to the U.S. in the midst of COVID. And so all of our assignees that we currently have here came over in the middle or at the tail end of COVID, between end of 2020 and the end of 2021. So right now, I can't say that we have any policy that's going to change because of COVID, because we haven't really had that experience to compare the two different ones. But Desiree, I definitely mirror your experience, whereas we have our international assignees are having issues because of their email address, not able to access the US or the data that they need because of the firewalls that we have. So at that case, we are looking to how we can get on more global platform so that everybody can have access to what they need to to be able to complete their job. And again, add to the success of the assignment.
Thank you, ladies. Now, given our current economic climate and corporations having always felt a need to be prudent in controlling costs, but specifically more so now due to the volatility of our industry, what cost-cutting measures have you all taken to contain your costs and within your global mobility program altogether over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I'll respond to this one. At Genesis Care, we've really just drilling down into the rationale and the need of the assignment. You know, ask management in today's environment, you know, can the employee do this job remotely? Do they really need to go to that host company for 2 years or 3 years? Is it something they can do in a shorter term assignment? And then also, again, because our program was birthed in the midst of the pandemic, a lot of times the details of the cost, so they just sent somebody over, and now we're providing that cost projection, because as the costs are coming in, they're like, oh my God, right? So now we provide that detailed cost projection to them to show them what it looks like if they were to do a 12-month assignment versus a 3-year assignment. And that has really changed a lot of the managers' attitudes when they see that the cost of that 3-year assignment could be almost $2 million. Then they're like, oh, you know, I don't think we can do this. And one of the also things that we're looking at that we've changed this year in 2023 is really looking at providing lump sums instead of our household goods shipments. So that has worked out a lot. Folks just like, I don't want to ship my stuff across the seas. I can just go to IKEA or somewhere when I get to the US or wherever I'm going and get it for my temporary assignment. So that's really what we're doing, just looking at, again, making sure that the management understands the cost. And then we've added in additional levels of approvals, right? So it's not just that line manager or that senior manager, but it goes all the way up to the C-suite for the approval of those assignments, where before just the manager made the decision, whoever owned that cost center made the decision.
Yes, ma'am. Well, and since we're there, I'll just go ahead and ask you now, how do you ensure that your employees are getting what they need in order to have a successful relocation or assignment, while staying within the parameters of your cost containment measures, first of all? And then also, how have your employees received? I mean, I know your program was birthed right during the pandemic, right? So they they may not necessarily see any change. I'm not really sure how
Mhm.
far you all have gotten in that process because it's only been a couple of years. But I'm just curious to know like how you're balancing their needs with the financial needs of your company.
Yep, at Genesis Care, we actually meet with the employee when their name first comes up to say this person we're looking at going on assignment, to kind of get a better understanding on what their role is going to be, what their needs is, their family size, and explain to them what policy they're going to be on, whether it's a short-term, long-term, or permanent transfer. And then we have a follow-up assignment, a follow-up meeting once that assignment has been approved and officially that they're officially going to go on assignment. So I have a touch base with them, if not weekly via a Zoom call or a Teams call, but definitely in an email. We're responding back and forth. And then I have meetings with our RMC and immigration providers also weekly, just to follow up on where we are with our assignees and if there's any issues that's being raised. Again, we look at what that policy provides. We have a very, I think, liberal policy. Most of the questions come around, again, is that household goods shipment. We provide, they have a lump sums that they get. Everybody gets a, relocation allowance, plus they can get, different allowances. So right now we haven't had any questions. I think the questions will come back in where we have now assignees that are returning, but they're going to a different country for an assignment. So I think that's when the questions will start to come in now to say, okay, what, does it make sense? Because most of the focus was on assignments coming to the US, not exiting the US.
Okay, now Desiree, I know that you all have a massive undertaking with the merger and with centralizing your policies, but given the cost of that in itself, are you even in the space of thinking about cost containment of your global mobility program? And if so, what kind of measures are you all taking?
So we do our best to support the business because they allocate how much funding they will give for each employee for their relocation benefits. So we don't have the final say necessarily on if they get package A or B. So if the business has the funding to support them, they will. So we just try to make sure that based on what they're giving, that we stay within the parameters as far as in our relationship with our vendors. But the costs are rising. The costs really are what they are. I can't say that we have any cost-effective measures to really kind of cut cost right now. But I will say that just like Dee mentioned, that we do have lump sum policies, and a lot of the businesses are saying, well, I can't do a full relocation package, but I can do maybe a 5 or 10K lump sum to at least assist the employee to getting back and forth. It's not ideal, but it does give them some type of support. So what I do consult with them. I primarily handle the lump sum. So I do talk to them and at least assess, well, what are your priorities? Where can we start? And then once I have an understanding of their family size and what they need, I will connect them with some of our vendors who will assist them. But it is challenging. It's a challenging time, I think, for everyone in trying to keep the parameters and keep the costs at bay.
As far back as I can remember, the cost of relocations, period. It didn't matter if it was domestic or global assignments. The costs have always been astronomical. And it's only natural to understand that in the situation where we live in the world that we live in today, and everything, including eggs, bread, milk, butter, everything is so much higher than it used to be. I'm actually really curious to see how those estimates kind of pan out as we begin to see the fact finding and the distribution of different types of infographics and data summaries that give that information. It'll be really interesting to see what the average cost is now. But I apologize for interrupting. Elena, do you all have any cost containment measures you want to speak to and speak to how you're balancing the employee experience with containing costs, the ever elusive battle.
It is. It's a tug of war almost. And being in the travel industry, there's a hesitation because the landscape in and of itself is just now coming out of pandemic. And so we're just really seeing where colleagues want to travel and get out there, and we're getting tour bookings. So when we place someone on assignment, our strategy has begun. We don't know if the business is going to be there to even sustain your assignment. So we'll put them on a short-term assignment, which is about 6 months, and then we'll localize them. And that's why we have to do a lot of conversation. So it's more like, we're glad to have you. Guess what? You're going to have to transition, and in about month 4, we'll know for sure if you're going to stay. So that has an impact on visa application, taxes. It's actually more work on the headquarters side, because we have to monitor things and then reissue agreements right at that mark. And boy, December is a really crazy month when doing that. But we just don't know. Something could be underbooked, and then we have these commitments where we can't lay off because labor laws are different in host countries. So we just can't. We're very super conservative about that. And we've always had a lump sum process, but now the lumps are different, right? So the lumps are much more basic, and we try to beef up healthcare and healthcare support and reimagine travel needs. So the home country visit is reassessed, where we buy one leg of the trip at a time. Or so okay, I'm glad y'all are nodding, because I'm like, oh, I feel bad by saying that. So we'll get you one leg. We don't know if you're gonna get back. We may assign you a whole nother country while you at your home visit, but it's different. It's a wait and see, right? So it's been a whole lot of drafting of new agreements. Every 6 months, just saying, okay, we're ready. Is this country even open yet? So we've also, with working in the greater China region in Taiwan and China, we just don't know. So we move folks to Taiwan and like, oh, China's open, but not fully open. We're just, watching the news and trying to beat our competitors to get on site and hoping there's not, any other public health crisis, political situation that will deter travelers. So it's never a dull day, I'll tell you that. But that's how we do our assignments. 6 months, and then hope for the best.
So let me make sure I understand. So basically your volume is like doubled, because you're doing an assignment first, and then you're turning around and localizing them. Yes, maybe not in every occasion, but so your volume is almost double.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a lot of work.
Double the assignment in a way, or double touching them. And that is so there is a cost, right? But it's measured differently. It's a labor cost and the management of that from the central location. But it's cost containment still, because we don't want to overcommit our capacity, and that is really driven by the travel landscape. So sometimes the industry creates a different culture than you want to have, and we just look at the human side. We want to give under promise, over deliver.
Right.
Look at the human aspect of putting someone in a location, saying you're localized, and have everything shut down. So that triggering moment from 2020 is still there, even though I wasn't on the staff then. I feel that even being on the team now, and I definitely know how it feels to have to give someone that news and transition the family and just disrupt schooling. So it's something that that sting is still felt. So even though it's cost containment, the human side of it, we're just trying to set expectations until we definitely know that we're going to have enrollments up to the level that can sustain this assignment. And so far, things are looking good. They're looking much better. But this time last year, it could have went in either way.
Mm. And Kristen?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So our mobility program is still, I will say, I wouldn't go as far to say it's in its infancy. It's probably about 9 years old or so, but it's still very young.
That's a big baby.
Still very young, right? And so, I mean, with that, so I've been at Zendesk now for a little over 2 years. And when I first came here, we actually did not have true relocation policies, nor did we have like an immigration policy, a mobility policy. We didn't have any of that. It was more so, these are the things that we usually do. And so this is what we are following through with. And when it came to our moves, our international moves, it was, okay, we're going to throw this arbitrary money lump sum amount at this individual, and then the business can choose from this menu of benefits that we have to offer based upon, I'm not really sure what the parameters were that were associated with it. So one of the biggest things, one of my biggest projects when I first started was to change that, because I think, we were seeing a lot of issues just purely from an equity standpoint. I mean, I had move profiles that, people who are similar job levels, similar move profiles, receiving two completely different things as far as support was concerned. And so we rolled out policies, tiered policies, and within that we have the whole core flex, if you will, component that's associated with it. And I can truly say that honestly, the rollout of those policies alone just served as a huge cost containment and ability for our finance team to appropriately estimate and understand what it is that we're going to be spending on a given move. If we know that, there's a role that's hard to fill, and we're going to most likely have to find talent that's outside of that market and relocate them in, a planning ability to understand, okay, what is the average cost for this, this permanent movement. Our policies were rolled out in May of 2021. We saw an overarching increase in relocation volume from 2021 to 2022 by about 20%, but yet saw a decrease in spend by 17%. And so I think that alone, again, showcases just the importance of having structure and what that structure can offer. I would say with respect to ensuring that the benefits themselves are sufficient and enough for our employees, I think that we're continuing to work on that. And that's part of the reason, why we do have the surveys that we have, and why we work so closely with our RMC to understand, okay, what sort of exceptions are we granting, and do we need to, rethink how this particular tier of the policy is formatted to account for that, so on and so forth. So I think a bit of a unique situation here, just given, the newness, if you will, of our policies themselves. But yeah, I mean, when I look back literally on the past couple of years, that's been our biggest way in which we've been able to contain costs. And I will say the only other thing that I can speak to is that while we have not really historically been in the business of international assignments, we have had a small handful of them. And there was a need or the business thought there was a need to have some, true international assignments towards the end of 2021. And after looking at cost, there were some red flags that were going off. They're like, oh, $1 million, $500,000. What are we talking about? And that in turn resulted in us actually creating and rolling out a local plus policy, which we used in lieu of your traditional long-term assignment. So huge cost savings in that regard.
So the big takeaway for everyone from what Kristen said is structure reduces cost. It's amazing. It's an amazing concept, but it actually works.
Thank you for that breakdown, Marie.
No problem. I'm always here to help, ladies. So now I want to talk a little bit about the shift in the demographic of employee that we currently see today. You know, in the wake of the Great Resignation and the dependable boomers, right now we have a whole different type of employee that is eligible to participate in global mobility programs globally. And I'm just wondering, you know, there's that shift in the desire to work from home. There is definitely an increase in the importance of work-life balance. So when you think about a lot of these things, how has your company's global mobility program been impacted by the shift in the type of employee we see in the workplace today? Miss Elena.
There are a few things. We reduce our work week altogether. And that has been really fun to watch and witness, but hard to participate in. And globally, the way it has manifested, because you have different labor requirements, it's a twofold thing where you have to make sure that there's equity applied in that. So there are different power structures and even mandatory leave. So you want to have like consistent experiences across border. We just implemented that in January, and we're touching base to see how's it going, how managers are able to adapt and still support clients and stakeholders with fewer hours, but we're not changing the business hours. We're just reducing the ability. And so far, it's really great, despite the pain points, it's really great feedback in that, okay, I may have to be on call and do an extra day, but I've reduced my work week to 4 days rather than doing the full 5-day work week. And it's something that employees are talking about amongst their peers at other organizations. And it's just been really great for our talent pipeline, who, when you have an applicant for a role, there's a demand of, I'm going to be virtual. I don't want to come into the office. I don't want to commute. So even for our hybrid roles, we only require 2 days in the office rather than 3 or even more. And there is a tug of war in what does that look like? How can we equitably apply it across, and beta testing? So it's a lot of effort from leadership to make sure that things are working. But it's just a different moment where, let's compare it to real estate, where it's a buyer's or seller's market. It is an employee's market now. And we are competing for top individuals to join your team. And it's just a different narrative where we want to make sure that we not only recruit you, but make sure that you feel psychologically safe and supported throughout your career with us. And that means, some accommodations that would have been unheard of 5 years ago, which means flexibility and remote work, and that impacts policies, but it also brings up new dynamics, such as how do you do compensation now when you are working fewer hours? How do you make sure that everything is fair with individuals that have different work styles or based in different locations? Do you still qualify for your healthcare if you work few hours? So it's a lot of logistical and philosophical changes that we had to make. But I think what is great is that we're willing to admit what we don't know in the midst of it, and willing to try it and just go back to what works, or have more of a kind of collaborative approach, and really listen to what colleagues feel that they need to be most successful. But it's definitely, no more like, this is how it's going to be, take it or leave it. But we're making adjustments to make sure that we retain the best.
Now, I will say specifically with my generation, what we saw was a greater instances of individuals such as myself having to lend to the care of the generation behind me and before me, right? Which is where you saw a lot of employees that had to have their companies make provision for their parents. If they were moving, they had to make sure there were certain benefits available to them to care for their families. Are there any nuances when it comes to benefits beyond schedule and beyond the compensation factor that you all have had to consider?
Absolutely, I would say some of the new parent leave or maternity leave is one of them. FMLA from a federal perspective, the Family Medical Leave Act and certain state provisions have actually forced the conversation. So if one state in the US requires or can subsidize paid family leave for supporting individuals, we have implemented that, but also having open town halls where we're like, where are you in your space? And I think that's the great reset during COVID that opened the door, because before employers didn't even ask how things are going at home.
Right.
You just knew that this colleague may needed to take more leave, or they may have shared. And so there's also the comfort that some individuals don't feel comfortable going to their boss or their supervisor saying, you know, I have to take care of my mom and pick up my babies from daycare, and I'm just exhausted. I don't feel like turning on my camera. I'm just trying to make it work. There's just a level of understanding that we have all emerged from this pandemic in a different way. Our responsibilities have ranged, and we're no longer alarmed when there is questions, when there are questions about being a fully remote employee. We try to keep things standardized, policy-wise, but there's an openness to talk about mental well-being. There's been more investment and communication around the support services or wraparound services involved with that, because this, you know, in addressing it from a practical perspective, but also if someone needs additional hours that can be subsidized for managing stress, we are willing to look into that and speak with our carriers and our providers about that. So we look at additional wraparound support when there are requests. So it's not just you need extra time, but what else do you need to get through this moment or to get through today? So I'm really, really sensitive or conscious that it's usually not the extra time or the extra process, it's the extra support that an employee may need, and to make sure that the same service is available regardless of which country you work in. And so sometimes that's a little research project to see where certain providers are available. And what's great is that we have a service through BetterHelp, so you can get virtual support, which is helpful for colleagues that may not have wellness or mental well-being support in their host country.
I will say that as I listen to you all, I'm really impressed with all of your organizations regarding the care that I can tell that these companies have for employees. And I can tell you that's something that I have seen a shift in over the past few years is, as you said, Elena, an increased concern for the actual employees that work at these companies. And it's just nice to see it reflected in the way that the global mobility policies are handled. Now, Desiree, would you say in this shift of employee and the type of employees and particularly in the needs of the workforce that we have today, are there any changes in your global mobility policy as it relates to those changes in the shift in type of employee that we're seeing?
Yeah, so the first thing I thought about was we had to create policies for remote work. We did not even have that initially, domestically as well as internationally. So we are working on that as well.
Mhm.
And of course, once the hybrid work schedule came back into play, our inbox was flooded with requests to want to work fully remotely, which makes sense. Like, we can't turn back the timetables. Like, we did experience COVID, we did experience being at home working full time. So I completely understand the request and wanting to remain that way as well. But I think, Elena, you made it, that was a great, what you were talking about as far as the care of the employees. We have to still take that into consideration, whether they work remotely, with full-time, which is 100%, or whether they choose to come in hybrid schedule, because even what does that look like? So many things have changed. Even with when I came in for a hybrid schedule, the partnerships that I had with the other departments, they were no longer really here, like at the same time. So it even changed the way that we work together as a collective. So I think we just had to be really flexible in how we approach everything. And yes, we have a policy, but to Elena's point, there are exceptions, and we have to figure out a way to make that work for the employee based on whatever their situation is. Because I think employees are having more options to be able to seek employment full-time remotely as well. So you do want to keep your people. So talent, keeping people that you want to stay with your organization, it has been key. So we're trying to do all we can to support the people that are here and continue, especially since we've been through so many more mergers as well. So
Right. Now, Kristen, I know you guys have a large remote working population. So I'm curious to understand, given that nuance to your program, whether that has caused you to look at a change, amend your global mobility policies in any kind of way, just to reflect the needs of that population?
Yeah, so as an organization, we coin ourselves as being digital first, which doesn't mean digital always. Digital first, though, right? So majority of our roles are remote. Like myself, I work remotely from my home. I don't. The closest office to me is in Wisconsin. So, and I'm in Maryland. So I don't and won't ever regularly go into an office. But it's interesting. The birth of us becoming digital first came through COVID. We were not that way before. Remote working was allowed and it was acceptable, but we had our hubs of folks that were located around where our offices were located around the globe. And so there was, similar to what Desiree said, the rollout of what does it mean to be digital first? What does it mean when we say you are remote? And I think one of the biggest challenges that, while I do feel like we've made a lot of headway, it's still a point of contention and confusion with some employees, is that when we say that we're digital first, the assumption being, oh, I can work from anywhere. Like, no, no, you cannot. Not legally, at least, nor with our policy. And so, yeah, crafting our policy and agreements in a way that employees understand that while, yes, you are working remotely and your place of work is your home, the parameters of your employment are, in fact, the state that you're residing in, the country that you're residing in, or the province if you're, in another country where, you reference provinces instead of states. But then we were having to, and we had to work through, how do we facilitate requests for folks that want to temporarily work outside of their normal jurisdiction of hire. And so we rolled out and created what we call our extended stay program. And it enables an individual to work outside of their normal place of work, which for myself would be Hanover, Maryland, for a certain amount of time throughout a given calendar year. you have to submit a request. It goes through a review process, which starts with my team confirming that the individual actually has the right to work in the location in which they're going to work temporarily, making sure that we have a footprint, making sure that we actually have, you know, a presence in the country or the state or location in which they're looking to work. And then making sure that the individual that's looking to take advantage of this program understands what they're call signing up for, you know, because there's still risk involved with working outside of one jurisdiction or higher. I heard, I think it may have been, Elena, you mentioned health insurance, right? That's a big potential issue for someone who's working outside of where they would normally work if their coverage doesn't extend to that new location, making sure that they're aware of that and that they're taking the necessary steps to secure, you know, maybe a secondary health insurance plan for the duration of time when they're in that location. The other side of that is permanent moves. So we have, and this is something that our my team also helps to oversee and facilitate. So we have permanent moves, obviously, that are business driven, right? Where you have those traditional relocation benefits that are extended to an individual, but we have an entirely different population of folks who are employee driven movement. The business is supportive of it, but supportive of it in the sense of, yes, we believe this individual can work in this new location and it won't negatively impact their ability to perform their job, but we're not paying for anything. So what does that look like from our team's perspective and our lens, and what is our responsibility? You know, you have that duty of care that still exists, regardless of if we want to pay for something, right? So we've been working over the past 18 months, and it's still a work in progress of putting together resources for employees that fall into that category. We've been working to develop partnerships with different providers that may offer, I'll call it discounted rates, if you will, for certain services. I think the biggest challenge that we have within our EMEA region is, even for folks that are EU nationals, there's a number of different registrations that have to occur when someone is moving across country borders. And if it were a move where we were offering our services, traditionally, they'd have a destination services provider that's assisting them with that and providing that hand of, this is where you go, this is what you have to do. And in some countries, it's very straightforward. Other countries, it is extremely confusing. So putting together resources to ensure that folks know what they're responsible for, not only from a legal standpoint, and meaning that it may impact, you know, their ability to get paid, like setting up a bank account, but also just from a taxation standpoint, you know, getting your social security equivalent number in said country, that sort of thing. So it's been an evolution. It's a continued work in progress, and it's a balancing act because, you know, and I can't remember who said this, but making sure that we're being equitable across the company. You know, I got a question once from an employee that said, wait a minute, so if I'm a visa holder in the United States and I'm based in Minnesota, I can't go work for Maryland? No, you can't, not legally, right? Like, so how do you deal with that? How do you balance that? Continual evolution, continual work in progress from our end.
That's going to be interesting to dig into with some of our tax experts, because we've long dealt with the stealth assignee who just goes off on their own. I can only imagine it's so much easier now for people to do that in the space where they're working from home. There's a lot of being upfront and communicative that has to happen in order to make sure all of the moving pieces are being accounted for. I can tell you now, I don't envy either of you, none of you, not one of you here. Not one of you here. Now, Dee, are there any benefits or considerations that you find Genesis Care has to take into consideration, you know, with this changing employee workforce that we have?
Yeah, I think, well, going back to Genesis Care, because we was birthed at the pandemic, one of the good things about, or one of the things that's happened with our expats that came over, is all of them came over to work remote. So our corporate office has been closed since the pandemic, and we still have not opened up the corporate office in the US yet. So most of everybody is working from home, right? And so for them, it's not much of a difference. The only issue is going back, I think it was Kristen who said, so they understand that if you're on a visa for Texas, you can't go work in California. Like, why can't I work in California? Like, because you're from Australia on an E3 and it says you're working in Texas and that's where you have to stay. So that's the challenge that we have. And, knowing that, people are working in other states is like, that's one of the challenges. How do you make sure that they are working in the state that they're only allowed to work in? And so it's just me reiterating that to them. If you're looking to move to another state, actually Genesis Care is supportive of it, but we need to understand, because we need to file the proper immigration first before you can move there.
Right.
And for our regular employees that's not expats, it's the same thing, right? You have to go through the process to say, I want to move now from Florida to New York. Is it okay for me to move? And then understanding, do we have the entity set up there? Are we have payroll set up there? And are we able to pay you from there? So we're kind of open right now. In the US side, they're still trying to decide whether we're going to bring corporate back into the office. It was talked about maybe 1 day a week or 2 days a week, but that's still up in the air. In Australia, which is our second largest, they actually have it, I think it's 2 days a week now. They're reporting back into the office. Some are coming in 1 day a week. So it's kind of getting through country by country, but kind of come up with a global policy. We're still working on that.
Oh, okay. Now, are there any global assignment locations to which you're finding it more difficult to attract talent participation? And if so, how do you manage your expat assignments to those undesirable locations? Elena, we'll start with you.
I'm still trying to figure that out. So my tough country right now is mainland China, which recently reopened, and just the recruitment process is different. I'm, up in the late evenings, posting in sketchy periodicals, postings, trying to find the expat community. I don't know Chinese, so it's like trying to translate stuff and say, hey, this is a good idea, when because we're looking for colleagues that speak both Chinese and English, Mandarin and English. So there are individuals who just want to work outside of the US, and that's really great, but there's a specific language proficiency that we're looking for. And I've been spoiled because we have colleagues in recruiting for other countries, like Japan and Taiwan. It's been fine finding that niche, but for China, which recently reopened, and there's been protests from young adults and students about quarantine. There is a hesitation to go back. And so even if you see someone that has repatriated from a previous assignment at another organization or recent graduates, they're like, I don't know. So then I thought maybe it's a money thing, but there's just right now a hesitation. I think there needs to the idea for westernized Western expats to look at China, mainland China, as an assignment. It's right now it's a challenge, and even certain job boards or platforms like LinkedIn will not allow us to post. In fact, they give a really big warning message. So I have to look at other platforms and venues to even distribute the announcements. So it's a nice puzzle that I'm working through. So if anyone out there who's listening to this is interested in working in Beijing at the moment, call me, email me.
Call me.
And please request. So we thought we could, we can't really throw a lot of money at them, but there's competitive wages and assignments, and that's a toughie. So if there's any advice on how to recruit, I'm open to that as well.
Yes, but for those who are going to contact Elena wanting to work in Beijing, you need to also know Mandarin.
Please, don't talk to me a minute. Reach out about that.
All right, Desiree, do you guys have any difficult locations where you're finding it hard to attract talent?
That's a good question. And I thought we really don't, mainly just because our expat population, they kind of go on rotation wherever needed for the news. So when things happen, I feel like they have the mindset where they know they have to go and they will be in a space that might not be favorable, but they will really take care of their work duties accordingly, because they know if they're not there, then we don't know what's happening in the world of news. So I don't know that I have one location, but I will say that there have been instances where they have had to be extended, where they were planning on starting a new assignment, but they had to stay in another location because there was unrest there. And we had to make provisions for them to get paid, to have extended temporary housing. We had to cancel their first plans and figure out a makeshift plan to keep that going, in addition to making sure that they're cared for in the space where they are. So all things happen. Some things you can plan for, some things you cannot. But we just, I don't know that there's just one location, though.
That's fair, especially given the space that you all are in. Now, Dee, I'm curious to know if you have even run across this yet, and if so, I'm curious to know if your company does anything beyond like the standard location or hardship allowances that companies. It's always about throw a little more money and the person will be willing to go, right? It will offset their inconvenience. So just curious, do you have any difficult locations and how are you managing them?
I wouldn't say that we have come across a difficult location yet, because we're only in 4 countries, and those locations are pretty good. Most of our difficulty is the position in those locations, like in West California on the West Coast. We have issues with California specific radiation therapists, right? So we can't find radiation therapists. And then just because we do have those employees in Spain and in the UK that may want to come, but the immigration to get them into the US immigration is not the most favorable. Whereas if they're coming from Australia, then we have an E3. If they're Australian national, it's a very easy visa pretty much to get to. So it's more like the position, not necessarily a difficult location, I would say.
Okay, that's fair. And so let's wrap this up with a nice, pretty bow, especially since we're the Mobility Collective. And I want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's been an ever increasing concern for corporate America, particularly in recent years. And I just wanted to know, are there any efforts within your company to increase diversity within the employee pool that participates in your global mobility program? Desiree?
I will definitely say yes, because just an overall attention to the fact that we need more diversity and inclusion as a company as a whole. Now, specifically for global mobility, that's something that we can work on. And I think that's something that our team can really focus on and maybe make some different changes as to how people give information about even assignments that are available. Like, I feel like if you know what's out there, you might consider some other options. And I think that's the biggest hindrance in really people even knowing what's available to even consider other options. But I will say that our new diversity and inclusion CEO, Asif Sadiq, he's doing an excellent job. I see him in a lot of what he's posting, a lot of what he's communicating, to really draw people's attention to the many facets of diversity and inclusion that we really need to be mindful of, and how to really make practical changes, because that's the goal, not just to talk about it because it's a fad or a new thing that we do. It's really to really have some real changes. And I feel like we are on the mend to getting there. So it's exciting.
That's good. You have to embrace it, right? Live it.
Yeah.
Yeah. See?
Yeah, I agree with Desiree. From us, the same thing. We don't really have it where it's well known as to what those expat or international assignments are. It's pretty much there's already a person that has been identified for that position, us posting that position just so that they can apply for it. And so, yeah, so that's one of the questions that comes up a lot is, how do I know about these expat positions? And as we're starting to now make it more open and becoming more diverse, I agree. I think that population will continue to increase. But yeah, in our organization, we're definitely open to it. And again, like Desiree said, not because it's, not making it a trend, but to make sure that it sticks with the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I think so often what you Dee and Desiree described, it's a matter particularly when it comes to assignments, right? I think historically it's typically an individual is tapped on the shoulder and selected, right? And from a mobility lens, we usually serve as the facilitator. We're not necessarily involved even in that selection process, nor are we asked questions around the data, the population that we're supporting, and the data around, okay, what sort of people are we relocating and providing services to? But one thing that I'm extremely proud of with Zendesk is that as an organization, DE&I has continued to be at the forefront of everything that we do. And I think that that's of the greatest importance, because if at the end of the day, the employee population itself is not diverse, and if we are just purely the facilitator of people being tapped on the shoulder, if that continues to be the way in which they're facilitated, then how would we possibly see a change? Right? So I have seen a lot of work that is continuing to be put into our recruiting processes, and the talent that we're bringing into the organization from the onset, which I think over time, I'm hopeful that we'll start to see a shift, and that the population that we're moving is reflective of our overarching employee population, which, if that is a diverse one, then I think we're winning. So yeah, I think from a mobility standpoint, though, where we've been able to continue to push that needle is being very intentional with respect to how our policies are crafted, and making sure that we're putting a lens on of, okay, making sure that somebody who perhaps has an elderly parent that they're caring for isn't discouraged on moving somewhere because they don't think that the company is going to be providing the adequate support that they need for themselves and that parent. So just being very mindful in our language, in our policies, and allowing for flexibility in our policies as well, to account for the fact that not every move profile is the same and not everybody's needs are the same.
True.
Yeah, I like the image that Kristen gave regarding the shoulder tap. So I'm trying to work in that system and codifying why you are tapping the shoulder. And oftentimes I'm given the reason that it's because of a special skill, because of experience and tenure. And I have had the challenge where I don't see the documentation. So we're going to create it. So we're going to start codifying what it means to tap the shoulder. And so if it is based on a skill, if it is based on tenure, then we will develop reports. We will start formally classifying the workforce in a way that enables a more equitable shoulder tap. And that includes being more open to looking at all levels of diversity. So not just family dynamic, not just the visual demographic part of it, but neurodiversity, what we can't see, how individuals think, how they feel, how they communicate, different work styles. And it's I'm kind of like really challenging my colleagues to really think about what they're saying. And so for my company, it's at Academic Travel Abroad, there was this movement after the George Floyd incident that created this watershed moment, but there have been conversations all along. And because it was ignited by George Floyd, it's much more of a racial component and not just a more comprehensive, inclusive. So I'm challenging just the thought process around diversity to be much more than race, because if you expand it and really look at invisible diversity, race will be part of it. Race will get pulled in, but also be intentional that when you, sometimes your systems can be very discriminatory and can be othering individuals. So looking at how we describe things and offering additional ways where individuals can show their full selves is a way we're trying to capture more data points on diversity so that we won't just fall to the usual race, gender, and even sexuality sometimes, but it could be race, gender, geography, just the go-tos is what I call them. But there's so much more to the human experience that we're not capturing in diversity, and that influences so much more, and we can actually have more impact if we look at it. Because otherwise, if you're trying to cater towards certain population that you may feel that it's other, you end up ostracizing and marginalizing everyone else, and you lose allies, you lose advocates. And then there's this tension of, well, I guess I gotta tap this shoulder because this is the brown shoulder, this is the black shoulder. So you don't want that to happen.
Right.
You want there to be an authentic, I'm tapping this shoulder because of the skill, because this person can do the job. Well, now you have more shoulders as an option to tap. And it becomes a matter of availability. So thank you, Kristen, for that analogy and really illustrating that. So we're just trying to not shift the system, but give more options if it's a different type of change management. So we're trying to give more options into something that is done anyway.
Well, you ladies really know how to wrap up a panel discussion. I love that. I do, because there is such a danger of going from one extreme to the other when you are just looking at diversity in terms of race, in terms of gender, and not really embracing the concept of removing all of the things that you could typically use to alienate someone, just removing all of that and just look at the beef, the meat inside and what it is you actually need. I think that I'm really hoping that this curve towards diversity, equity, and inclusion does not just fizzle away because it was a hot button for a moment and now we have to move on to something else. I really hope that it's truly fleshed out where people can fully embrace it. So I want to thank you guys. I want to extend a huge thank you to all of you for sharing your time, to educate everyone on all that your respective companies are considering during this volatile time of economic recovery that we're facing right now. I'm sure your insights are going to prove helpful to many people as they navigate the sometimes daunting task of ensuring there's a balance between the employees' needs and business concerns. As the Mobility Collective continues to bring educational opportunities like this to the industry, be sure that I will be tapping on your shoulders for that expertise again in the future. Sorry, Kristen, I had to do it because you said tapping on the shoulder. Anyway, a big thank you to you guys again, and a thank you to our audience for joining us. And I really hope that you guys will look for more engaging content coming to you shortly from the Mobility Collective. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you.